The emergency lights painted the council chamber in shades of amber and red. 300 delegates from across the galaxy sat in their designated zones, voices rising in heated debate. At the center of the chaos stood Ambassador Rillan, all four of his thin arms trembling as he projected holographic evidence for the assembled representatives. Dead humans floated in the projection. Their cargo ship had been split open like a broken egg, exposing frozen bodies to the vacuum of space. The attack had happened 6 days ago in neutral territory. The victims had been transporting medical supplies to a colony suffering from a plague outbreak. Ambassador Owen watched from the human delegation section, his weathered face revealing nothing. Gray streaks ran through his dark hair, and deep lines marked the corners of his eyes. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, his hands folded calmly in his lap despite the horror displayed above them all. Rillan's voice cracked with emotion as he addressed the council. His insectoid features made reading his expressions difficult, but his distress was obvious in every gesture. He had been arguing for 20 minutes, presenting evidence of attacks on human vessels dating back 6 months. The response from most delegates ranged from polite disinterest to barely concealed amusement. A reptilian delegate from the Dravik Syndicate lounged in his elevated seat, sharp teeth visible as he smiled. His name was Crane, and his military decorations gleamed under the chamber lights. He had been laughing quietly throughout Rillan's presentation, not bothering to hide his contempt. The council chair, a tall being named Voreth from an aquatic species, finally raised one webbed hand for silence. His flowing robes rippled with bioluminescent patterns as he spoke in a measured tone that somehow managed to sound both official and dismissive at the same time. Ambassador Rillan, we acknowledge your concern for our human colleagues. However, space remains a dangerous frontier. Perhaps humanity should consider investing more heavily in defensive capabilities rather than relying on diplomatic protests. The chamber filled with approving murmurs. Several delegates nodded, their various anatomies creating a wave of agreement across the tiers. Crane stood, his scaled body catching the light as he addressed the chamber without waiting for formal recognition. I find it curious that a species claims to possess advanced technology, yet proves unable to defend simple cargo vessels. Perhaps human ships are not worth the resources required to protect them. Laughter rippled through several delegation sections. Owen's expression never changed, though his fingers tightened slightly against each other. Rillan tried to continue his presentation, but the holographic evidence flickered and died as the council chair disabled his access to the central projector. Voreth's tone carried finality when he spoke again. This matter will be reviewed by the appropriate subcommittee. We shall reconvene for standard session proceedings. The decision was made. Case dismissed. Rillan's shoulders sagged as he returned to his seat beside the human delegation. Owen placed one hand briefly on his ally's arm in silent thanks before standing and making his way toward the exit. Several delegates watched him leave, some whispering behind raised appendages. The human ambassador's calm acceptance of the dismissal only reinforced their beliefs. Clearly, humanity understood its place in the galactic hierarchy. Advanced in some technologies perhaps, but too civilized, too soft to survive in the harsh reality of interstellar politics. What none of them noticed was the subtle change in Owen's eyes as he walked through the massive doors. The patience there had taken on a different quality, like deep water that appears calm on the surface while dangerous currents move beneath. 3 sectors away, a human colony transport called the Horizon's Promise continued its journey toward a new settlement. The ship carried 12,000 civilians, mostly families who had volunteered to establish humanity's newest outpost. Children ran through the corridors while their parents prepared for the landing that was still weeks away. In the cargo holds, carefully packed supplies represented years of preparation. Agricultural equipment, medical facilities, educational materials, and everything needed to build a thriving community from scratch. The ship's hull bore fresh paint, bright with hope and optimism. Captain Nina reviewed the navigation data on her private screen, checking their route for the third time that day. At 53, she had spent 30 years in space and never lost her sense of wonder at the beauty of it. Her cabin held pictures of her grown children back on Earth and her young grandchildren who she hoped would someday visit the new colony. She approved the current course and turned her attention to the daily status reports. All systems showed green. The ship was performing beautifully, and morale among the colonists remained high. They had organized community events, started planning their new government, and several couples had already announced weddings scheduled for after landing. Nina allowed herself a small smile. This was why she loved colony missions. The sense of purpose, the excitement of new beginnings, the cooperation required to build something meaningful. Humanity at its best. 6 Dravik warships watched the horizon's promise from long-range sensors, their dark hulls invisible against the background of space. They had been tracking the colony ship for 3 days, waiting for it to move far enough from any potential witnesses. Commander Crane stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the tactical display with satisfaction. The human vessel showed no weapons, no shields beyond basic meteorite deflection, no escort craft. Defenseless. Perfect. His crew moved efficiently through pre-attack preparations, their movements practiced and precise. This would be their 4th raid on human ships this month. Each one had proven easier than the last. The humans always surrendered immediately, always begged, always offered their cargo in exchange for lives that would be taken anyway. Crane found their predictability almost boring, but the syndicate leadership encouraged these attacks. Testing humanity's resolve, they called it, seeing how far they could push before the humans actually fought back. So far, the answer appeared to be indefinitely. He settled into his command chair and gave the order to advance. His ships dropped their stealth fields and began their approach, weapons already powering up. There was no need for subtlety. The humans would see them coming and do what they always did. Surrender, beg, and die quietly. Proximity alarms screamed across the horizon's promise. Captain Nina's screen filled with red warning indicators as 6 warships appeared on long-range sensors, closing fast. Her training kicked in immediately, and she activated the emergency broadcast system while simultaneously ordering all civilians to designated shelter areas. The response was practiced and calm. Families gathered children, helped elderly neighbors, and moved quickly but without panic toward the reinforced sections of the ship. They had drilled for this scenario dozens of times, though none of them had truly believed it would happen. Nina opened a channel to the approaching vessels, keeping her voice steady despite the ice forming in her stomach. She identified her ship, stated its civilian status, and requested the intentions of the unknown craft. The response came quickly, and her blood ran cold when she recognized the Dravik military signatures. Crane's face appeared on her main screen, his reptilian features twisted in something that might have been amusement. Nina had reviewed the intelligence briefings about Dravik raids. None of the previous encounters had ended well. She made the only choice available to her. Nina formally surrendered, offering all cargo, all resources, everything aboard the ship except the lives of her passengers. Her voice remained professional as she outlined the colony's supplies they carried, emphasizing their value and her willingness to transfer them peacefully. Crane listened to her entire speech without interrupting. When she finished, silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then he laughed, the sound harsh and ugly through the communication system. Your cargo is worthless to us. Your ship, however, provides excellent target practice for my crew. They need to maintain their skills. Nina felt the world tilt beneath her. She opened her mouth to respond, to beg, to offer anything else, but Crane had already closed the channel. Her sensors showed the Dravik weapons charging, energy signatures building to lethal levels. She had 47 seconds from detection to impact. Nina spent them well. Her fingers flew across the console, broadcasting distress signals on every emergency frequency, transmitting the Horizon's Promise's final position, uploading every piece of sensor data about the Dravik ships to the automated buoys scattered throughout the sector. If she was going to die, the information would survive. Someone would know what happened here. Someone would remember the 12,000 people who had only wanted to build a better future. The Dravik weapons fired in perfect synchronization. 36 beams of concentrated energy struck the colony ship from multiple angles, designed to prevent any section from surviving. The Horizon's Promise simply ceased to exist, transformed instantly from a vessel full of life and hope into expanding clouds of superheated debris. On the Dravik flagship, Crane's crew celebrated. Several officers exchanged credits over bets about the explosion pattern. Others were already scanning for the next potential target. To them, this was just another successful training exercise. The distress signals reached 3 human vessels within the hour. Military patrol ships that had been conducting routine sensor sweeps in nearby sectors. They arrived to find only wreckage and the automated recordings of what had transpired. For 6 hours, the human crews searched the debris field with methodical precision, hopping against hope to find survivors. They found none. What they did find were personal items that had somehow survived the initial explosion. A child's stuffed toy, a wedding ring, a data pad with family photos still intact. The patrol commanders compiled everything into a detailed report and transmitted it directly to Earth, flagged with the highest priority codes. Then they remained at the site, maintaining position like silent guardians over a mass grave. Ambassador Owen received notification of the massacre while reviewing diplomatic correspondence in his private quarters. He read the report 3 times, his expression never changing. Then he sat motionless for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. When he finally moved, it was to compose a formal request for emergency council session. The message was brief and contained no emotional language, just a simple statement of facts and a request for immediate hearing on matters of galactic security. The council granted his request, though several delegates expressed annoyance at being recalled so soon after the previous session. They gathered in the same chamber, many still discussing trivial matters and sharing casual conversation as they took their seats. The atmosphere changed when Owen entered. Something in his walk, in the set of his shoulders, made several of the more perceptive delegates pause mid-sentence. He moved like a man who had left something vital behind and no longer cared about maintaining comfortable pretenses. Vorath called the session to order, his tone suggesting he expected this to be brief. Owen walked to the central podium and waited for absolute silence. It took longer than usual, but eventually every conversation died away under the weight of his patient stare. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual warmth. The professorial tone was gone, replaced by something clinical and precise, as if he were reading technical specifications rather than addressing living beings. 47 hours ago, I presented evidence of attacks on human vessels. The Council declined to take action. 26 hours ago, the colony ship Horizon's Promise was destroyed by Dravik military forces under the command of Representative Crane. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the Dravik delegation. Crane met their stares without shame, his posture relaxed and confident. Owen continued without pause, his words falling like hammer blows. 12,000 civilians were aboard. 2,300 of them were children under the age of 10. Captain Nina requested peaceful resolution and offered full surrender. Her request was denied. The ship was destroyed for what the Dravik commander described as target practice. Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing the final transmissions from the horizon's promise. Nina's face, calm and professional even as death approached. The sensor readings of the Dravik attack, the debris field that remained. Humanity has attempted diplomatic resolution of these attacks for 6 months. We have filed protests, requested council intervention, and offered peaceful solutions. These efforts have been met with mockery and continued violence. Therefore, I am here to deliver humanity's final communication on this matter. Owen's eyes swept the chamber, meeting the gaze of every delegate who dared to look at him. Continued hostile action against human vessels will result in the immediate cessation of all courtesy protocols. This is your only notification. The chamber erupted in confused noise. Several delegates demanded clarification. Others discussed among themselves what the strange phrasing might mean. Crane stood, openly laughing at the vague threat. Owen saved his statement to the official record, turned, and walked out without acknowledging any of the questions shouted at his back. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like finality itself. The mining platforms orbited a cluster of mineral-rich asteroids in what humans called the outer reaches. Dozens of workers extracted rare elements from the ancient rocks, their operations providing resources for colonies across 3 sectors. The platforms themselves were civilian installations, unarmed and unshielded beyond basic meteorite protection. Lieutenant Hayes monitored the operations from the primary platform's control center. At 32, he had spent 8 years in various mining operations and considered himself good at spotting potential problems before they developed. The sudden appearance of 30 Dravik warships definitely qualified as a problem. His crew saw them at the same time, and Hayes immediately activated evacuation protocols. Workers abandoned their equipment and headed for the reinforced shelter sections. Everyone moved quickly but without panic, their training taking over. The Dravik fleet made no attempt at subtlety. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect attack formation, weapons already powering up. Hayes recognized the configuration from intelligence reports. This was Crane's personal battle group, the same force that had destroyed the Horizon's promise. Hayes opened a communication channel, his young face appearing on screens across the Dravik fleet. He kept his expression neutral and his voice flat as he spoke. Dravik vessels, this is Lieutenant Hayes of Mining Platform Delta 7. Courtesy protocols have been suspended per official notification issued 48 hours ago. You have 10 seconds to withdraw from this sector. On the Dravik flagship, Crane's bridge erupted in laughter. The idea that a civilian mining platform was giving them ultimatums struck the crew as the funniest thing they had heard all week. Crane did not even bother to count down the supposed deadline. At 5 seconds, he signaled weapons free. Every Dravik ship in the fleet fired simultaneously. Or rather, they attempted to fire. Weapons systems that had been functioning perfectly moments before simply stopped responding. Energy banks that had been fully charged showed zero output. Missile tubes remained sealed despite multiple launch commands. The laughter on Crane's bridge died instantly. His tactical officer stared at her console in disbelief, fingers flying across controls that refused to obey. Around the flagship, the same scene repeated on every Dravik vessel. 30 warships, rendered completely impotent in the space of a heartbeat. Then the humans arrived. 3 vessels dropped their stealth fields, appearing from within the asteroid cluster where they had been waiting. They were smaller than the Dravik warships but moved with a grace that made the larger ships seem clumsy by comparison. Their hulls were smooth and dark, showing technology that made Dravik sensors scream warnings their crews could not understand. The human ships did not fire immediately. Instead, they simply moved into position, surrounding the disabled Dravik fleet with mathematical precision. When they finally activated their weapons, the effect was surgical. A human destroyer approached 5 Dravik cruisers. Energy beams, invisible to normal sensors, touched each ship for less than a second. Engine sections simply stopped functioning, not damaged or destroyed, but rendered completely inert. The cruisers went dark, emergency power maintaining life support but nothing else. Crane watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. A human frigate disabled his shields with a technology that his science officer could not even identify. Another human ship approached his weapons arrays and somehow neutralized them without causing any visible damage. In 4 minutes, 30 Dravik warships floated helplessly in space, not destroyed, not damaged in any conventional sense, just stopped as if someone had found the off switch for their entire technological infrastructure. Hayes's voice came over the open channel, still flat and emotionless. "You wanted to see us fight. This is us being gentle. Retrieve your crews. Do not return to this sector." The 3 human vessels maintained their positions, weapons active, while Crane's fleet sat in stunned silence. The Dravik commander tried repeatedly to restart his systems. Nothing responded. His ship, along with every other vessel in his fleet, was now nothing more than a very expensive piece of drifting metal. News of the incident spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Automated systems captured every moment and transmitted the data through communication networks that spanned hundreds of worlds. By the time the first hour had passed, billions of beings had seen the footage. The response was immediate and dramatic. 7 different species that had been conducting raids on human vessels received identical messages. Simple, direct, and utterly terrifying in their implications. Human voices, calm and professional, giving them options they had never considered necessary before. Some species chose wisely and immediately ceased all hostile actions. Their leaders issued formal apologies and offered reparations. Others, emboldened by years of easy victories, decided to test whether the Dravik incident was an isolated event. It was not. A pirate fleet operating near the Andali cluster learned this lesson when they attempted to intercept a human transport. 16 ships attacked what they believed was an unarmed merchant vessel. The transport dropped its disguise, revealed itself as a human warship, and disabled the entire pirate fleet in less than 3 minutes. Raiders in the Coral sector had a similar experience. They had been attacking human science vessels for months, stealing research data and equipment. When they struck what they thought was another easy target, they discovered that human patience had limits. The raiders were captured, their ships confiscated, and they were delivered to local authorities along with complete evidence of their crimes. Each incident followed the same pattern. Human forces appeared with overwhelming technological superiority, disabled hostile vessels without casualties, and demonstrated capabilities that should not have been possible. Weapons that bypassed shields, sensors that penetrated stealth fields, defensive systems that rendered enemy attacks completely ineffective. Galactic military analysts worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. The technology humans displayed was decades, perhaps centuries, beyond anything currently known. Questions multiplied faster than answers. How long had humanity possessed these capabilities? Why had they hidden them? What else were they capable of that they had not yet revealed? The Galactic Council called another emergency session. This time, when Ambassador Owen entered the chamber, no one laughed. No one dismissed him. Every delegate watched with the careful attention usually reserved for dangerous predators. They were finally beginning to understand that humanity's courtesy had never been weakness. It had been a choice, and that choice had ended. The council chamber had never been so full or so quiet. Representatives from every major species packed the tiers, with additional observers watching through holographic links from across the galaxy. Security forces lined the walls, though everyone understood they were present more for show than actual protection. If humanity had wanted to attack the council, no amount of guards would matter. Holographic displays surrounded the central area, each one showing different footage of human military operations. The images repeated on an endless loop, forcing the assembled delegates to watch their assumptions crumble over and over again. Disabled fleets, captured raiders, technology that made their most advanced weapons seem like primitive tools. Ambassador Owen walked to the central podium with the same measured pace he had always used. His appearance was unchanged from previous sessions. Same simple uniform, same gray-streaked hair, same weathered face, but every delegate in the chamber watched him with new eyes, seeing past the gentle exterior to the steel beneath. Vorath, the council chair, looked significantly less comfortable in his elevated seat. When he spoke, his usual dismissive tone had been replaced with careful formality. Ambassador Owen, the council recognizes the human delegation. You have requested this session to address recent military actions across multiple sectors. Owen nodded once and activated his own holographic interface. A map appeared above the chamber, spanning the entire known galaxy. Red markers began appearing, hundreds of them, each one representing an attack on human vessels over the past 6 months. 237 incidents, Owen said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. 3,147 human casualties. Every incident was documented, reported to this council, and met with indifference or mockery. He gestured and the map zoomed in on specific locations. Images appeared beside each marker: destroyed cargo ships, murdered crew members, stolen research, ransacked colonies. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. We filed diplomatic protests after each incident. We requested council intervention 17 times. We offered peaceful resolutions on 32 separate occasions. These efforts were ignored, dismissed, or treated as evidence of weakness. Owen's tone never changed, never rose, never showed emotion. He presented facts with the clinical precision of a medical examiner describing autopsy results. The effect was far more chilling than any angry speech would have been. A delegate from the Telrathi Federation stood, seeking recognition to speak. Owen simply looked at him, and the delegate sat back down without saying a word. The Horizons Promise massacre was the final demonstration that diplomacy had failed, Owen continued. 12,000 civilians, including thousands of children, were murdered for sport. The officer responsible is currently sitting in this very chamber. Every eye turned to Crane. The Dravik commander sat rigid in his seat, his earlier confidence completely gone. He had aged visibly in the past 2 days, his scales dull and his posture suggesting defeat. Owen gestured again, and new holograms appeared. These showed detailed technical readouts, sensor analyses, and tactical assessments. Every human vessel operating in galactic space has been gathering intelligence since we first made contact with other species. We mapped your military capabilities, analyzed your weapons technology, studied your tactical doctrines, and prepared countermeasures. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. Owen waited for silence before continuing. The merchant ships you attacked were military vessels in disguise. The research stations you raided were intelligence-gathering posts. The mining operations you targeted were sensor networks. While you saw us as easy prey, we were learning everything we needed to know about potential threats. He pulled up footage from the recent incidents. Human weapons bypassing shields, human sensors detecting stealth ships, human technology that simply turned enemy vessels off like deactivating a machine. Your weapons technology is approximately 400 years behind ours, Owen said flatly. Your defensive systems are inadequate against even our most basic offensive capabilities. We allowed you to believe otherwise because we hoped you would choose peace. Ambassador Rillan, the insecta diplomat who had stood with humanity from the beginning, remained motionless in his seat. His 4 arms were folded, his mandibles still. Even he had not known the full extent of human capabilities. Owen's next words fell like stones into still water. We came to the galaxy with hope. Earth taught us what we are capable of. We evolved as hunters on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to cooperate, to plan, to build tools and weapons beyond anything nature could provide. We became the apex predator of our planet not through strength alone, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever survival required. The chamber was absolutely silent. Delegates who had spent decades studying galactic history were hearing something unprecedented. A species openly acknowledging its capacity for violence while simultaneously explaining why it had chosen a different path. When we reached the stars, we made a choice, Owen continued. We chose to be better than our history. We chose to offer friendship before weapons. We chose to build rather than destroy. We shared technology that could help everyone. We kept defensive capabilities hidden not from malice but from experience. We know what arms races do. We know where fear leads. He paused, and for the first time, a hint of emotion crept into his voice. But we will not sacrifice our people on the altar of our ideals. We will not watch our children die while we beg for mercy that will never come. You forced this choice upon us. New holograms appeared, showing human fleet positions across the galaxy. Every species that had attacked human vessels suddenly understood they were being monitored, watched, tracked. We are not invading anyone. We are not conquering territory. We are not seeking dominance. We are enforcing accountability. Every species that participated in attacks on human vessels will surrender those responsible for the violence. You will provide reparations for the lives taken and the property destroyed. You will cease all hostile actions immediately. Owen's eyes swept the chamber. Those who comply will find us generous in peace. Those who refuse will discover we are equally capable in war. This is not a negotiation. This is an accounting. Several delegates stood simultaneously, announcing their species' full cooperation. Others sat frozen, calculating odds and options. A few looked defiant, but their defiance seemed hollow in the face of what they had witnessed. Vorath struggled to maintain his authority. The Council will take your demands under advisement. Owen shook his head slowly. No, the Council will watch as we enforce them. The Dravik home system had stood unconquered for 3,000 years. 3 planets orbited a red dwarf star, each one covered with military installations that represented centuries of martial development. Massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons. Shipyards larger than cities churned out warships in continuous production. The system's defenses had repelled every invasion attempt in recorded history. High Commander Draxus stood in the planetary command bunker, studying tactical displays that showed every defensive asset under his command. 537 warships, 42 orbital weapons platforms, countless missile batteries and energy cannons protecting the surface. His entire military force mobilized and ready. Against 12 human ships. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on him. Draxus had spent 60 years in military service, rising through the ranks through skill and determination. He had never run from a fight, but he had also never faced an enemy like this. Reports from the fleet encounters had been clear. Human technology was vastly superior, but surely numbers still mattered. Surely 500 ships could overwhelm 12, no matter how advanced. The alternative was unthinkable. Draxus activated the broadcast system, transmitting on all frequencies across the entire galaxy. If humanity wanted to humiliate the Dravik, they would do it in front of witnesses. Perhaps the presence of observers would make them cautious. Perhaps shame would protect where weapons could not. Humanity sends 12 ships against the Dravik home fleet, Draxus announced, his voice carrying across light years. This arrogance will be their extinction. Watch as we demonstrate why the Dravik have remained unconquered for 3 millennia. His fleet moved into position, a wall of military might that had broken countless enemies. Weapons charged, shields activated, every sensor locked onto the approaching human vessels. Commander Patricia Wells watched the Dravik preparations from the bridge of the human flagship. Her short gray hair and calm expression gave no indication of concern. She had reviewed the tactical data, knew exactly what the Dravik were capable of, and understood how this would end. She opened a channel to Draxus directly. "High Commander, we are here to collect those responsible for the Horizon's Promise massacre. Surrender them peacefully and we depart. Resist, and we will take them by force. This is your only warning." Draxus's laugh came through clearly. "You threaten us in our own home system. You are either insane or suicidal, perhaps both." Wells sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. "Then this is a lesson. Watch carefully." The Dravik fleet attacked with overwhelming force. 500 ships launched everything they had, missiles by the thousands, energy beams that could vaporize asteroids, kinetic weapons moving at fractions of light speed, enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Every single weapon simply stopped working. Missiles froze in space, propulsion systems dead. Energy beams dissipated harmlessly meters from their emitters. Kinetic projectiles lost all momentum and drifted like debris. The most concentrated military assault in Dravik history became nothing more than an expensive light show. Wells's voice came over the open channel, calm and educational. "Your weapons operate on principles we mastered 4 centuries ago. Every system you possess, we can disable remotely. Your shields cannot stop our technology because they were not designed to recognize it. Your sensors cannot track our ships because we control what they see." One of the human vessels broke formation and approached the largest Dravik dreadnought. The massive warship, pride of the fleet and symbol of Dravik power, tried to maneuver away. Its engines simply stopped responding. The human ship did not fire a single weapon. It simply projected a field of some kind, invisible to normal sensors. The dreadnought went dark, every system offline. Emergency power maintaining life support and nothing else. "This is not a battle," Wells explained, as another human vessel disabled 3 Dravik cruisers simultaneously. "This is a demonstration of the gap between our capabilities. We could have done this 6 months ago. We could have done this the first time you attacked us. We chose to offer peace instead." Draxus watched his command displays show ship after ship going offline. His tactical officers tried everything, activating backup systems and emergency protocols. Nothing worked. The humans were not destroying the fleet. They were simply turning it off, the way one might deactivate malfunctioning equipment. 20 minutes after the engagement began, the entire Dravik military floated helplessly in space. 537 warships reduced to powered-down hulks, not a single human shot fired, not a single Dravik casualty, just perfect, overwhelming technological dominance. Wells's face appeared on every screen in the Dravik home system. "We did not come here for conquest. We did not come for resources or territory. We came for justice. The officers who destroyed the Horizon's promise will face accountability for their actions. You can surrender them peacefully or we will take them. The choice is yours, but it will not change the outcome." In the command bunker, Draxus stared at his useless tactical displays. Around him, his staff sat in stunned silence. The greatest military force the Dravik had ever assembled, rendered impotent in less time than it took to drink a cup of tea. His communication officer spoke quietly. "High Commander, the Council of Elders is requesting immediate contact." Draxus already knew what they would say, what they had to say. Pride was worth nothing if it led to extinction. The humans had made their point with surgical precision. They could destroy the Dravik civilization without firing a shot. They chose not to. That choice itself was a message. "Contact the human flagship," Draxus said, his voice heavy. Inform Commander Wells that we will comply with their demands." Across the galaxy, billions watched the transmission in real time. Species that had mocked humanity's peaceful approach now understood the truth. The humans had not been weak. They had been restrained. There was a massive difference, and that difference had just been demonstrated with absolute clarity. The footage would be studied in military academies for generations, not for what the humans did, but for what they chose not to do. They had the power to annihilate an entire civilization and used it only to make their point. That kind of restraint was more frightening than any weapon. In the council chamber, delegates sat in silence, watching the events unfold. Ambassador Owen stood at the central podium, his expression unchanged. When the Dravik surrender was confirmed, he spoke one sentence. "This is what happens when you force gentle people to show their teeth." 3 weeks had passed since the Dravik demonstration. The galaxy had settled into a new rhythm, one defined by careful respect and genuine fear. Attack reports on human vessels had dropped to zero overnight. Species that had spent months raiding with impunity now gave human ships wide berth, their captains offering formal greetings rather than weapons fire. The Galactic Council convened for its first standard session since the crisis. The atmosphere in the chamber had transformed completely. Delegates arrived early, conversed in hushed tones, and maintained careful courtesy in all interactions. Security forces remained vigilant, though everyone understood they were watching for different threats now. Ambassador Owen entered through the main doors and conversation stopped, not from fear, though that was present, but from something more complex. Respect mixed with uncertainty, curiosity tempered by caution. He had returned to his gentle demeanor, the patient diplomat who had sat through months of dismissals and mockery, but no one would ever make the mistake of seeing that gentleness as weakness again. He took his seat in the human delegation area with a slight smile and a nod to Ambassador Rillan, who returned the gesture with visible relief. The insecta diplomat had spent the past weeks fielding questions from dozens of species wanting to understand humanity's philosophy and intentions. Voreth called the session to order, his tone markedly different from previous meetings. The Aquatic Council chair had learned painful lessons about assumptions and dismissiveness. The Council recognizes all delegations. We have several matters to address regarding recent events and future protocols. A young delegate from the Corelli Union stood, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber lights. She was newly appointed, representing a species that had only recently achieved spaceflight. Her question was direct and honest. "Ambassador Owen, I speak for many younger species when I ask this. Why did humanity not demonstrate its military capabilities earlier? Why allow the attacks to continue for 6 months?" Owen rose and walked to the central podium. His movements were unhurried, his expression thoughtful. "Because we hoped we would not have to." The simple answer hung in the air. The young Corelli delegate looked confused, clearly expecting something more complex. Owen continued, his voice taking on the professorial tone that many delegates had come to recognize. "Earth is what we call a death world. Everything there evolved to survive in one of the harshest environments known. We competed with predators larger and stronger than us. We endured ice ages, plagues, natural disasters. We became apex hunters not through individual strength, but through cooperation, tool use, and the ability to persist when others would have given up." Holographic displays activated, showing images of Earth, lions hunting, storms raging, ancient humans working together to bring down massive prey. "We know what we are capable of," Owen said quietly. "We have been warriors for millions of years. We have perfected the art of killing because our survival demanded it. But we have also been teachers, builders, protectors. We formed communities. We created art. We developed ethics and philosophy. We asked ourselves not just what we could do, but what we should do." He gestured and the holograms shifted to show human achievements. Cities, art, scientific discoveries, the first human ships reaching for the stars. When we developed the technology to reach other species, we made a choice about who we wanted to be. We could have arrived as conquerors. Earth had taught us everything we needed to know about dominating others. Instead, we chose to arrive as friends. We shared knowledge that could help everyone. We offered cooperation instead of competition. Owen paused, his eyes scanning the assembled delegates. We kept our defensive capabilities hidden not from arrogance or deception, but from experience. We know what happens when fear drives military development. We know how arms races spiral out of control. We have destroyed ourselves repeatedly throughout our history. We learned those lessons in blood and fire. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even the young Corelli delegate seemed frozen, caught by the weight of his words. The technology we have revealed is not our most advanced, Owen admitted, and several delegates gasped. It is simply what we deemed necessary to make our point. We possess capabilities far beyond what you have witnessed. We will continue to keep most of them hidden, not as a threat, but as a courtesy, because we remember what it feels like to live in fear of annihilation. A delegate from the Harmon Confederation stood. Then humanity seeks to be our protector, to enforce peace through superior force. Owen shook his head. No, we seek to be your partners. What we enforce is accountability. Those who choose violence against civilians will face consequences. Those who respect basic ethics will find us generous and cooperative. The choice belongs to each species individually. He gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed recent cooperation agreements. Dozens of species had approached humanity with offers of alliance, trade, and mutual defense. We are not interested in empire. We are interested in survival, our own and everyone else's, because despite what you may think, we actually meant it when we said we came in peace. Vorath spoke carefully. And if other species develop technology that matches human capabilities. Owen's smile was genuine. Then we will welcome them as equals and hope they use that power as wisely as we try to. Competition drives innovation. We have never believed we should be the only advanced species. We just insist that advancement come with responsibility. The session continued for several hours, addressing reparations, new security protocols, and revised contact procedures. Multiple species formalized their apologies and began negotiations for damages. Crane and several other officers had been transferred to neutral custody pending war crimes tribunals. As the session concluded, Owen stood at one of the massive viewing ports, looking out at the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue marble hanging in the darkness. Rillen approached and stood beside him in comfortable silence. They finally understand, the insectoid diplomat said quietly. Owen nodded. They understand we have teeth. Now we have to teach them we prefer not to use them. Across the galaxy, human ships resumed their normal operations. Cargo vessels, research stations, colony transports, all moving with the same purpose and optimism they had always shown. But now, when other species encountered them, they saw both sides of humanity. The builders and the warriors, the teachers and the hunters, the species that desperately wanted peace but was absolutely prepared for war. The polite giants had shown the galaxy their true nature, and the galaxy was safer for it.